The Wyoming wind cut through Cheyenne's dusty streets like a blade, carrying the scent of horse sweat and promise of another scorching afternoon. Sam Morrison adjusted his worn leather hat, the brim casting shadows over eyes that had seen 42 years of frontier life. His boots, caked with mud from the stockyards, echoed against the wooden planks as he approached the Stagecoach depot. The cattle deal had gone better than expected. 30,000 head sold to the railroad company, for more money than most men would see in 10 lifetimes. The leather saddlebag slung over his shoulder contained bank drafts worth more than some small towns. But Sam Morrison had learned long ago that displaying wealth in the territories was an invitation for trouble. His simple brown coat and weathered appearance served him well. Nobody suspected the dusty rancher of being one of the wealthiest men in Wyoming. "Denver coach, departing in 5 minutes," the depot agent called out, his voice competing with the neighing of horses and creaking of wagon wheels. Sam approached what he assumed was his stagecoach, a well-maintained Concorde with fresh paint and sturdy wheels. The door stood open, and without much thought he climbed inside, settling into the worn leather seat with a grunt of satisfaction. Finally, he could rest after 3 days of negotiations. "¿Qué está haciendo usted aquí?" The sharp voice made Sam's eyes snap open. Across from him sat a young woman with striking dark eyes that blazed with suspicion and fear. Her black hair was pulled back severely, and her simple but well-made traveling dress suggested modest means. What caught his immediate attention, however, was the small but deadly derringer pointed directly at his chest. "Ma'am, I think there's been some misunderstanding," Sam began, raising his hands slowly. "No hay malentendido ninguno," Elena Rodriguez said, her accent thick with tension. "I know exactly what you are. The way you climbed into this coach, looking around like you own it. Those heavy bags." Her dark eyes flicked to his saddlebags. "You're here to rob me, Verdad?" Sam couldn't help but notice how her hands remained steady, despite her obvious fear. Most people would be trembling by now, but this woman held the weapon like she knew how to use it. "Ma'am, I assure you I'm not here to rob anyone. My name is Samuel Morrison, and I have a ticket for the Denver stage." He moved slowly, reaching for his vest pocket. "If you'll allow me to show you—" "No se mueva." Elena's voice cracked like a whip. "Keep your hands where I can see them. I've heard about men like you preying on travelers, especially women traveling alone." Her jaw set with determination. "But you picked the wrong woman today." The stagecoach rocked slightly as the driver climbed up to his seat. Sam realized they were about to depart, and this misunderstanding needed to be resolved quickly. "Listen, señorita, it's Senora Rodriguez to you," she interrupted, though something flickered in her eyes at the respectful Spanish address. "Senora Rodriguez, I believe we may both be passengers on this coach. Perhaps if we could examine our tickets together." "What I believe," Elena said, her voice steady as steel, "is that you saw a woman traveling alone and thought she'd be an easy target. But I'm not some helpless city girl. I was raised on the borderlands, and I know how to protect myself." The coach lurched forward with a jolt that would have thrown a less experienced person off balance. Elena didn't flinch, her weapon never wavering. Sam found himself genuinely impressed, despite the circumstances. "Senora, I respect your caution, but I think if you'll allow me to explain—" "The only explaining you need to do is why you should get out of this coach right now, before I decide you're too dangerous to let go." Sam studied her face, noting the mix of fear and fierce determination. This wasn't a woman who frightened easily, and her reaction suggested she'd faced real danger before. Something about her bearing spoke of strength forged by necessity rather than choice. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll get out. But first, would you mind telling me which coach this is?" Elena's eyes narrowed. "This is the private coach to Denver, hired by Senora Rodriguez." She paused, then added with bitter pride, "That's me. I paid for privacy, and I won't have it violated by some bandito who thinks a Mexican woman is easy prey." Sam's heart sank as understanding dawned. "Senora, I believe I owe you an apology. I think I've climbed into the wrong stagecoach." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Elena's features, though the derringer remained pointed at his heart. The stagecoach rolled through the Wyoming countryside, its wheels finding every rut and stone on the dusty trail. Elena kept the derringer trained on Sam, though her grip had relaxed slightly as confusion replaced some of her initial suspicion. "The wrong coach?" she repeated, her accent softening the words. "What do you mean?" Sam gestured carefully toward the window. "I was supposed to take the public Denver stage. I thought this was it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I apologize for the intrusion, Senora Rodriguez. If you'll allow me to speak with the driver, I'll tow. The sharp command from outside cut through their conversation. The stagecoach lurched to a sudden stop, throwing both passengers forward. Elena's derringer clattered to the floor as she braced herself against the seat. Through the window, Sam saw 4 mounted men wearing bandanas over their faces, rifles pointed at the driver. His blood ran cold as he recognized the situation. Real stagecoach robbers. "Nobody move and nobody gets hurt," the leader shouted. "This is just business." Elena's face had gone pale, her dark eyes wide with genuine fear now. She fumbled for her fallen weapon, but Sam reached out instinctively. "Stay down," he whispered urgently. "Let me handle this." "You?" Elena hissed back. "How do I know you're not with them?" Before Sam could answer, the stagecoach door was yanked open. A bearded man with cold grey eyes peered inside, his rifle sweeping from Sam to Elena. Well, what have we got here?" The robber's gaze lingered on Elena with uncomfortable interest. "Pretty little señorita and her gentleman friend. Both of you, out. Now." Sam moved first, stepping down from the coach with his hands visible. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek, gestured with his rifle. "Bags and valuables. All of it." His eyes fixed on Sam's saddlebags. "Those look mighty heavy, friend." Elena emerged from the coach, her chin raised defiantly despite her fear. The scarred leader's attention immediately shifted to her. "Mexican Rose," he said with a leering grin. "Bet you got some pretty jewelry hidden away." "I have nothing of value," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Oh, I think you do," the robber replied, stepping closer. "Search her, Jake." "Touch her and you'll regret it," Sam said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made all 4 robbers look at him with new attention. The leader laughed. "Big talk from a man staring down 4 rifles? You her husband?" "A gentleman doesn't allow a lady to be mistreated regardless of their relationship," Sam replied, his stance shifting subtly as he calculated distances and angles. Elena glanced at him with surprise. Whatever she'd expected from the man she'd thought was a robber, this wasn't it. "Jake, check the fancy man's bags while I have a conversation with the señorita," the leader ordered. As Jake approached the saddlebags, his eyes widened at the sight of the bank drafts visible through the partially open leather. "Boss, you need to see this." The distraction was what Sam had been waiting for. In one fluid motion, he dove toward the nearest robber while shouting to Elena, "Run!" But Elena Rodriguez had not survived 28 years on the borderlands by running from trouble. Instead, she scooped up a handful of dirt and threw it into the scarred leader's eyes before grabbing the fallen robber's rifle. "Vámonos!" she shouted to Sam, providing covering fire as chaos erupted around the stagecoach. Sam grappled with one robber while dodging shots from another. The driver, an elderly man named Josiah, cracked his whip at a third bandit's horse, sending it rearing. "The rocks!" Elena called out, pointing to a cluster of boulders 50 yards away. "Cover!" Sam grabbed his saddlebags and followed Elena's lead as she provided remarkably accurate covering fire. They reached the rocks, just as the remaining robbers regrouped. "You can shoot!" Sam panted, genuinely impressed, as Elena reloaded the stolen rifle with practiced efficiency. "Border life teaches you many things," Elena replied, her fear replaced by grim determination, including that sometimes the only help you can count on is your own. "How many bullets do we have?" Sam asked, checking the cylinder of a pistol he'd taken from the robber he'd fought. "Not enough to fight 4 men, Elena admitted, but maybe enough to discourage them. The robbers had taken cover behind the stagecoach, using it as a shield while they planned their next move. Sam could hear them arguing. "They saw the money, Jake," the leader was saying. "That's more cash than we'd see in 10 jobs. But boss, that woman can shoot. She nearly took Tom's ear off." Elena looked at Sam with new assessment. "You fought to protect me. Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Sam replied simply, "and because you're not the helpless victim they thought you were." For the first time since he'd entered her coach, Elena Rodriguez smiled at Samuel Morrison. It was a fierce, grateful smile that transformed her entire face. "Then I suppose we're in this together, Senor Morrison." "I suppose we are, Senora Rodriguez." The afternoon sun blazed overhead as Sam and Elena maintained their defensive position behind the weathered rocks. The standoff had lasted nearly an hour, with occasional gunfire exchanged, but no decisive action from either side. The heat was becoming unbearable, and their water supply was running dangerously low. "They're waiting for nightfall," Elena observed, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "In the dark, they can surround us." Sam nodded grimly. "We need to move before then." He studied the terrain, noting a dry creek bed that wound toward a distant ridge. That creek bed could provide cover, but it's risky in daylight. Everything about this situation is risky, Elena replied, checking her ammunition again. But staying here means certain death or worse. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both tense, but instead of more robbers, they saw a lone rider approaching from the east, old Josiah, the stagecoach driver, leading 2 horses. "Figured you folks might need these," Josiah called out, staying low as he reached their position. "Managed to circle around while those varmints were arguing over your money, Mr. Morrison." Sam's eyes sharpened. "You know who I am?" "Son, everybody in Wyoming knows Sam Morrison, even if you don't advertise it." Josiah grinned, revealing several missing teeth. "That scar on your left hand from the cattle branding, that's famous in these parts. Plus, I've driven you before, though you probably don't remember." Elena looked between the 2 men with growing understanding. "You're not just any rancher, are you?" "Sam Morrison owns the largest cattle operation in Wyoming Territory," Josiah explained proudly. "Been fair to every man who's worked for him, regardless of color or creed." "Why do you think those bandits were so interested in his saddlebags?" Elena's expression grew complicated as she processed this information. "A rich Anglo rancher," she murmured, more to herself than to them. "Wealth doesn't change what's right and wrong," Sam said quietly, meeting her gaze. "I'd have helped you regardless of who I am." Before Elena could respond, gunfire erupted from the stagecoach position. The robbers had noticed Josiah's arrival and were advancing under covering fire. "Time to go," Sam commanded, helping Elena onto one of the horses while Josiah took the other. Sam swung up behind Elena, his arms coming around her to grasp the reins. They rode hard toward the creek bed, bullets whistling past them. Elena's body was tense against Sam's chest, but she handled the jarring ride with the skill of someone accustomed to horseback travel. "There!" Elena pointed toward a cluster of cottonwoods ahead. "We can lose them in those trees." They plunged into the grove just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The trees provided blessed shade and concealment, but Sam knew they couldn't stop long. "We need to reach Millerville by nightfall," Josiah panted as they paused to rest the horses. "It's the only town between here and Denver with a sheriff." "How far?" Sam asked. 20 miles, maybe more. Hard riding." Elena slid down from the horse, her legs unsteady after the wild ride. "I can make it," she said firmly, though Sam noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Senora Rodriguez," Sam began carefully, "why are you traveling to Denver, if you don't mind my asking?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes distant. Finally, she spoke. "My father was Judge William Hartwell. He acknowledged me in his will, left me property in Denver." Her voice carried a mixture of pride and bitterness. "His legitimate family is contesting it, of course. A Mexican woman has no right to Anglo inheritance, they say." Sam felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "Judge Hartwell was a good man. If he left you something, it's yours by right." "You knew him?" Elena asked, surprised. "He presided over several land disputes involving my ranch. Always fair, always honest." Sam studied her face, seeing the resemblance now in her strong jawline and intelligent eyes. "He would have wanted you to have what's rightfully yours." Josiah interrupted their conversation with an urgent whisper. "Riders coming, 4 of them." The robbers had tracked them to the grove. Sam quickly assessed their options. The trees provided good cover but limited escape routes. "Elena," he said, using her first name without thinking, "can you handle that rifle while riding?" "Better than most men," she replied, her fear replaced by determination. "Then we're going to ride straight through them. They won't expect a frontal assault." Elena's eyes widened. "That's completely insane." "Sometimes insane is the only thing that works," Sam replied with a grim smile. "Trust me." Elena looked at him for a long moment. This wealthy rancher who had protected her fought beside her and was now asking her to follow him in what seemed like a suicide charge. Everything about her upbringing told her not to trust any Anglo, especially a rich one, but his actions spoke louder than her prejudices. "See," she said simply, "I trust you." Sam felt something stir in his chest at those words, something he hadn't felt in years. "Then let's show these bandits what happens when they threaten a lady in Wyoming Territory." As they prepared to mount up, Elena caught his arm. "Sam," she said quietly, "whatever happens, gracias, for treating me with respect, for seeing me as more than just a Mexican woman to be used or ignored." "Elena," Sam replied, his voice rough with emotion, "any man who couldn't see your worth is a fool." The sound of approaching horses grew louder. It was time to ride toward whatever fate awaited them on the road to Millerville. "Vamonos!" Sam shouted, spurring his horse forward as Elena raised her rifle. Their desperate charge through the cottonwoods caught the robbers completely off guard. Elena's first shot dropped the leader from his saddle, while Sam's revolver barked twice, sending the remaining bandits scattering for cover. They burst from the tree line at full gallop, Josiah close behind on his mount. The surviving robbers, demoralized by their leader's fall and the unexpected ferocity of the attack, chose discretion over valor and disappeared into the gathering dusk. "That was magnificent shooting," Sam called to Elena as they rode hard toward the distant lights of Millerville. "My father, the judge, taught me," Elena replied, her voice carrying both pride and sadness. "He said a woman alone needed to know how to protect herself, especially on the frontier." The lights of Millerville grew brighter as they approached, but Sam noticed Elena growing more tense with each mile. When they finally rode into the small town's main street, he understood why. The faces that turned to watch their arrival were uniformly hostile, particularly toward Elena. "Mexican woman with a white man," someone muttered from the boardwalk. "Trouble, mark my words." They dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, a modest building with peeling paint and barred windows. Sheriff Dave Hawkins emerged, a heavy-set man in his 50s, with suspicious eyes that immediately focused on Elena with obvious disapproval. "What's this about?" Hawkins asked, ignoring Elena entirely and addressing Sam. "We were robbed by a gang about 20 miles east," Sam explained. 4 men led by a scarred fellow. "We managed to fight them off." "You kill any of them?" the sheriff asked, still not looking at Elena. "The woman here shot their leader," Josiah interjected proudly. "Best shooting I've seen in 40 years of frontier living." Hawkins' expression darkened as he finally looked at Elena. "Mexican woman shooting white men? That's a serious accusation." "They were robbers," Elena protested, her voice rising with indignation. "They threatened our lives." "Your word against dead men's reputations," Hawkins replied coldly, "and everyone knows how Mexican women feel about white folks." Sam stepped forward, his jaw tight with anger. "Sheriff, I'm Samuel Morrison, and I can vouch for everything that happened. This lady saved our lives." The sheriff's attitude shifted slightly at Sam's name. Everyone in Wyoming knew the Morrison name and wealth, but his suspicion of Elena remained. "Mr. Morrison, sir, with respect, these Mexican women can be persuasive. Maybe she convinced you to see things her way." Elena's hands clenched into fists. "Persuasiva? I didn't convince anyone of anything except those bandits that they picked the wrong people to rob." "Easy there, señorita," Hawkins said with mock calm. "No need to get all riled up, though I suppose that's typical behavior for your kind." The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Sam felt Elena stiffen beside him, saw the pain flash across her face before she masked it with proud defiance. "Sheriff Hawkins," Sam said, his voice dangerously quiet, "I suggest you show proper respect to the lady. She's the daughter of Judge Hartwell and has every right to courteous treatment." "Judge Hartwell?" Hawkins laughed harshly. "That old fool had a weakness for Mexican whores. Everyone knew that. Don't mean his bastards deserve—" Sam's fist connected with the sheriff's jaw before the man could finish the sentence. Hawkins stumbled backward, his hand going to his gun, but found himself staring down the barrels of both Sam's revolver and Elena's rifle. "Nobody," Sam said with lethal calm, "talks about the lady that way in my presence." The confrontation had drawn a crowd, and Sam could hear the ugly murmurs growing louder. "Mexican woman causing trouble," someone said. "Should have known better than to let her type into town." Elena looked around at the hostile faces, her chin raised defiantly despite the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I see the hospitality of Anglo towns hasn't changed," she said bitterly. "Elena," Sam said softly, "don't let their ignorance diminish who you are." But the damage was done. Elena had faced a lifetime of such treatment, and Sam could see it weighing on her shoulders like an invisible burden. The strong, fearless woman who had fought beside him against the robbers seemed suddenly fragile in the face of this systematic prejudice. "We need rooms for the night," Sam announced to the crowd. "The lady and I require accommodation while we continue to Denver." "The Mexican can sleep in the stables," Hawkins said, wiping blood from his split lip. "We don't allow her kind in the hotel." "Then I'll sleep in the stables as well," Sam replied firmly. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, Mrs. Sarah Chen, the town seamstress, and one of the few Chinese residents. "Mr. Morrison, miss," she said quietly, "I have a spare room above my shop. You're both welcome to stay there." The gesture of kindness from another outsider wasn't lost on Elena. She gave Mrs. Chen a grateful nod. "Gracias, señora. You are very kind." As they gathered their belongings, Elena spoke quietly to Sam. "You don't have to defend me anymore, Sam. This is how it always is for people like me." "People like you," Sam repeated. "You mean brave, intelligent, capable people. Then this world has a problem, because those are exactly the kind of people it needs most." Elena looked at him with something approaching wonder. "Why do you care? Your reputation, your business interests, associating with me could hurt both." Sam met her eyes steadily. "Because what's right is right, regardless of what it costs me. And because—" he paused, then continued with quiet intensity, "because you're worth defending, Elena Rodriguez. Any fool can see that." In the lamplight of Millerville's dusty main street, something changed between them, a recognition that what they felt went beyond gratitude or circumstance, into something deeper and more dangerous, in a world determined to keep them apart. Dawn broke over Denver with the promise of autumn in the crisp mountain air. Sam and Elena had ridden through the night, leaving Millerville's hostility behind them. Now as they approached the bustling territorial capital, Elena's nervous energy was palpable. "The Hartwell Law Office is on Larimer Street," she said, adjusting her travel-worn dress with hands that trembled slightly. "My father's former partner, Mr. Whitman, sent word that my half-brothers would be there today to contest the will." Sam studied her profile, noting the mixture of determination and vulnerability in her expression. Over the past 3 days, he had come to admire not just her courage, but her intelligence, her fierce loyalty, and the way she held herself with dignity despite the world's efforts to diminish her. "Elena," he said quietly, "whatever happens in there, remember that your father chose to acknowledge you. That means something." She turned to look at him, her dark eyes reflecting the morning light. "What happens after today, Sam? You return to your ranch, your world. I don't know where I belong anymore." Before Sam could answer, they reached the law office, a substantial brick building that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Outside, 2 well-dressed men in their 30s waited with obvious impatience. The Hartwell brothers, Sam realized, noting their resemblance to Elena in their strong jawlines and intelligent eyes. "So the Mexican woman finally shows up," the taller brother Charles said as they dismounted, "and she's brought a friend." His gaze took in Sam's expensive boots and quality clothing with calculating interest. "I am Elena Rodriguez," Elena announced, her voice steady and proud. "Daughter of Judge William Hartwell. I'm here to claim what is rightfully mine." "Daughter?" The shorter brother Thomas laughed bitterly. "You're his bastard by some Mexican whore. Father may have lost his mind in his final years, but we won't stand by while you steal our inheritance." Sam stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. "I'm Samuel Morrison, and I suggest you show the lady proper respect." Charles's eyes widened with recognition. "The cattle baron. What's your interest in this matter, Mr. Morrison?" "I'm here as a friend," Sam replied evenly. "Your father was an honorable man who served justice faithfully. If he left Miss Rodriguez property, then she has every legal right to it." "Legal right?" Thomas scoffed. "She's Mexican. She has no rights in an American court." "Actually," came a new voice from the office doorway, "she has every right." An elderly lawyer with kind eyes and graying hair emerged. "I'm Benjamin Whitman, and I handled Judge Hartwell's affairs for 30 years. The will is ironclad. Elena Rodriguez is to receive the Denver property and $5,000. Charles's face reddened with anger. "We'll fight this in court. No judge will side with a Mexican over legitimate white heirs." "The will has already been probated," Whitman replied calmly. "The property transfer is complete. Miss Rodriguez, if you'll come inside, I have the deed and bank drafts ready." Eleanor looked stunned. After years of struggle and uncertainty, her inheritance was real and secure. But as they moved toward the office, Thomas blocked her path. "You may have legal papers," he snarled, "but you'll never be accepted in Denver society. We'll make sure every decent person knows what you are. A Mexican interloper trying to steal what belongs to real Americans." "I'm as American as you are," Elena replied with quiet dignity. "I was born in Texas when it was still part of the United States. My mother's family has lived on this land for generations, before your ancestors arrived." "Texas Mexican trash," Charles added venomously. "Father was a fool to acknowledge you." This time it was Elena who moved faster than anyone expected. Her palm cracked across Charles's cheek with enough force to make him stagger. "My father was worth 10 of either of you," she said fiercely. "He saw people's hearts, not their skin color. That's why he was a great judge and why you'll never be half the men he was." Sam felt pride swell in his chest as Elena stood up to her tormentors, but he also saw the pain in her eyes. These were her half-brothers, the only family she had left, and their rejection cut deeply. Inside the law office, Whitman presented Elena with the deed to a small but valuable property near downtown Denver, along with bank drafts worth more money than she had ever imagined possessing. "Your father spoke of you often," Whitman said gently. "He regretted not being able to publicly acknowledge you during his lifetime, but he wanted to ensure your future was secure." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she clutched the papers. Did he ever say if he loved me?" "My dear," Whitman smiled, "he kept your mother's picture on his desk until the day he died. You were the light of his later years." As they left the office, Sam noticed Elena's conflicted expression. She had won her inheritance, secured her future, but the victory felt hollow in the face of her family's hatred. "Elena," Sam said, as they stood on the busy Denver street, "what will you do now?" She looked around at the bustling city, then back at him. "I don't know. I have property here, money for the first time in my life, but I don't belong in their world, Sam. I never will." "Then maybe," Sam said, taking her hands in his, "you should consider my world instead." Eleanor's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've spent 3 days with the most remarkable woman I've ever met. I'm saying that your courage, your strength, your heart, they've changed something in me." Sam's voice grew stronger with conviction. "I'm saying I love you, Elena Rodriguez, and I don't care what anyone thinks about it." "Sam," Elena whispered, "I'm Mexican. You're one of the wealthiest Anglo ranchers in Wyoming. People will never accept us together." "Then we'll build our own acceptance," Sam replied firmly. "On my ranch, what matters is character, not color. I have Mexican, Irish, German, and American workers, and they're all treated with equal respect. You'd fit right in." Elena studied his face, seeing the sincerity there. "You're asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to take a chance on something real," Sam said. "I'm asking you to come home with me, not as my property or my shame, but as my partner, my equal, my wife, if you'll have me." Elena thought of the hostile faces in Millerville, the rejection of her half-brothers, the lifetime of prejudice she had endured. Then she looked at Sam Morrison, the man who had defended her honor, fought beside her, and seen her worth when others saw only her heritage. "Sigh," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Sam Morrison, I'll take that chance." As Sam pulled her into his arms on the busy Denver street, Elena realized she had found something more valuable than property or money. She had found a place where she truly belonged, in the heart of a man who loved her for exactly who she was. Their kiss sealed not just their personal commitment, but a promise that love could triumph over prejudice, that two people from different worlds could build something beautiful together in the vast, unforgiving, but ultimately hopeful territory of the American West. 6 months later, Elena Morrison stood on the porch of the sprawling ranch house watching her husband work with the hands in the corral. The workers, men of every nationality and color, respected her as the patron's wife and valued her for her intelligence and fairness. She had found her place at last, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. The ranch had become home in ways she had never imagined possible, and as Sam caught her eye and smiled, Elena knew that sometimes the best journeys began by climbing into the wrong stagecoach and finding exactly the right person waiting there.